Origin of government. Government is neither a scientific concept nor a rational sociological construct, nor is it a logical, practical method of human organization and cooperation. The belief in government is not based on reason, it is based on faith. In truth, the belief in government is a religion made up of a set of dogmatic teachings, irrational doctrines which fly in the face of both evidence and logic, and which are methodically memorized and repeated by the faithful. Like other religions, the gospel of government describes a superhuman, supernatural entity above mere mortals, which issues commandments to the peasantry, for whom unquestioning obedience is a moral imperative. Disobeying to the commandments, breaking the law, is viewed as a sin, and the faithful delight in the punishment of the infidels and sinners, criminals, while at the same time taking great pride in their own loyalty and humble subservience to their God as law abiding taxpayers. And while the mortals may humbly beg their lords for favors and for permission to do certain things, it is considered blasphemous and outrageous for one of the lowest peasants to imagine himself to be fit to decide which of the government, God's laws, he should follow and which it is okay for him to ignore. The mantra is, you can work to try to change the law, but as long as it's the law, we all have to follow it. The religious nature of the belief in authority is put on display for all to see whenever people solemnly stand with their hands upon their hearts and religiously proclaim their undying faith in and loyalty to a flag and a government, the Republic. It rarely occurs to those who recite the Pledge of Allegiance, while feeling deep pride, what they are actually doing is swearing allegiance to a system of subjugation and authoritarian control. In short, they are promising to do as they are told and behave as loyal subjects to their masters. Aside from the patently inaccurate phrase at the end about liberty and justice for all, the entire pledge is about subservience to the government, which claims to represent the collective, as if that in itself is some great and noble goal. The pledge and the mentality and emotions it is intended up to stir will apply equally well to any tyrannical regime in history. It is a promise to be obedient and easily controlled, to subordinate oneself to the Republic, rather than a promise to do the right thing. Many other patriotic rituals and songs, as well as the overly religious reverence given to two pieces of parchment, the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution, also demonstrate that people do not merely view government as a practical necessity, they view it as a God to be praised and worshiped, honored, and obeyed. The main factor distinguishing the belief in government from other religions today is that people actually believe in the God called government. The other gods people claim to believe in and churches they attend are now, by comparison, little more than empty rituals and half heartedly parroted superstitions. When it comes to their everyday lives, the God that people actually pray to save them from misfortune, to smite their enemies, and to shower them with blessings is government. It is government whose commandments the people most often respect and obey. Whenever a conflict arises between government and the teachings of the lesser gods, such as pay your fair share taxation versus thou shalt not steal, or duty to country military service versus thou shalt not murder, the commands of government supersede all the teachings of other religions. Politicians, the high priests of the church of government, the mouthpieces and representatives of government who deliver the sacred law from on high, even openly declare that it is permissible for the people to practice whatever religion they wish as long as they do not run afoul of the supreme religion by disobeying the law, meaning the dictates of the God called government. Perhaps most telling is that if you suggest to the average person that maybe God does not exist, he will likely respond with less emotion and hostility than if you bring up the idea of life without government. This indicates which religion people are more deeply emotionally attached to and which religion they actually believe in more firmly. In fact, they believe so deeply in government that they do not even recognize it as being a belief at all. The reason so many people respond to the idea of a stateless society, anarchy, with insults, apocalyptic predictions, and emotional tantrums rather than with calm reasoning is because their belief in government is not the result of careful, rational consideration of evidence and logic. It is in every way a religious faith believed only because of prolonged indoctrination, and there is almost nothing which state worshippers find more existentially terrifying than contemplating the possibility that government, their savior and protector, teacher and master, does not actually exist and never did. Many political rituals have overtly religious overtones to them. The grandiose cathedral like buildings, the pomp and circumstance at inaugurations and other government ceremonies, the traditional costumes and age old rituals, the way the members of the ruling class are treated and described, example, honorable, all give such proceedings in a, an air of holiness and reverence, far more indicative of religious rites than of a practical means of collective organization. It might be nice to have some morally superior, all powerful deity to protect the innocent, to prevent injustice. And that is what statists hope government will be: a wise, unbiased, all knowing, and all powerful final decider that will override and supersede the flawed, short sighted, and selfish whims of man, unearily dispensing justice and fairness. However, there is no such thing, and can be no such thing, and there are many reasons why it is utterly foolish to look to government as the solution to human perfection. For example, what almost every statist wants is for government to enforce objective rules of civilized behavior. More specifically, each individual wants his own perception of justice and morality to be enforced by authority, while failing to realize that the moment there is an authority, it is no longer up to that individual to decide what counts as moral or just. The authority will claim the right to do so for him. And so, over and over again, believers in authority have tried to create an all powerful force for good by anointing some people as rulers, only to quickly learn that once the master is on the throne, he does not care what his slaves were hoping he would do with the power they gave him. And this has happened to all kinds of statists with very different beliefs and agendas. Socialists assert that government is needed to fairly redistribute wealth. Objectivists assert that government is needed to protect individual rights. Constitutionalists assert that a government is needed to carry out only those tasks listed in the Constitution. Believers in democracy assert that government is needed to carry out the will of the majority. Many Christians assert that government is needed to enforce God's laws, and so on. And in every case, the people end up disappointed because their authority always changes the plan in order to serve the interests of the people in power. Once a set of rulers are in charge, what the masses had intended for them to do with their power does not matter. This fact has been demonstrated by every government in history. Once the people create a master, the people, by definition, are no longer in charge. To expect otherwise, even without all of the historical examples, is absurd. To expect the master to serve the slave, to expect power to be used solely for the benefit of the one being controlled, not the one in control, is ridiculous. What makes it even more insane is that statists claiming that appointing rulers is the only way to overcome the imperfections and untrustworthiness of man. Statists look out at a world full of strangers who have questionable motives and dubious morality, and they are afraid of what some of those people might do. That, in and of itself, is a perfectly reasonable concern. But then, as protection against what some of those people might do, statists advocate giving some of those same people of questionable virtue a huge amount of power and societal permission to rule over everyone else in the vain hope that by some miracle those people will happen to decide to use their newfound power only for good. In other words, the statist looks at his fellow man and thinks, I don't trust you to be my neighbor, but I trust you to be my master. Bizarrely, almost every statist admits that politicians are more dishonest, corrupt, conniving, and selfish than most people, but still insists that civilization can exist only if those particularly untrustworthy people are given both the power and right to forcibly control everyone else. Believers in government truly believe that the one thing that can keep them safe from the flaws in human nature is taking some of those flawed humans of, of the most flawed, in fact, and in pointing them as gods with the right to dominate all of mankind, in the absurd hope that if given such tremendous power, such people will use it only for good. And the fact that that has never happened in the history of the world does not stop statists from insisting that it needs to happen to ensure peaceful civilization. Author's personal note. I say all of this as a former devout statist who, for most of my life, not only accepted the self contradictions and delusional rationalizations underlying the myth of government, but vehemently spread the mythology myself. I did not escape my own authoritarian indoctrination quickly or comfortably, but let go of the superstition slowly and reluctantly, with much intellectual kicking and screaming along the way. I mention this only so that it may be understood that when I refer to the belief in authority as utterly irrational and insane, I am attacking my own prior beliefs as much as anyone else's. Another way to look at it is that statists worry that different people have different beliefs, different viewpoints, different standards of morality. They express concerns such as, what if there is no government and someone thinks it's okay to kill me and steal my stuff? Yes, if there are conflicting views, as there always have been and always will be, they can lead to conflict. The authoritarian solution is that instead of everyone deciding for himself what is right and what he should do, there should be a central authority that will make one set of rules that will be enforced on everyone. Statists obviously hope that the authority will issue and enforce the right rules, but they never explain how or why this would happen. Since the edicts of government are written by mere human beings, usually exceptionally power hungry, corrupt human beings, why should anyone expect their rules to be better than the rules each individual would choose for himself? The belief in government does not make everyone agree, it only creates an opportunity to drastically escalate personal disagreements into large scale wars and mass oppression. Nor does having an authority settle any dispute, nor does having an authority settling a dispute do anything to guarantee the right side wins. Yet, statists talk as if government will be fair, reasonable, and rational in situations where individuals would not be. Again, this demonstrates that believers in government imagine authority to have superhuman virtues that should be trusted above the virtues of mere mortals. History shows otherwise. A twisted sense of morality in one person or a few can result in the murder of one person or even dozens. But that same twisted sense of morality in just a few people, when they get a hold of the machine called government, can result in the murder of millions. The statist wants his idea of good rules forced on everyone by a central authority, but has no way to make that happen and no reason to expect that it will happen. In their search for an all powerful good guy to save the day, statists always end up creating all powerful bad guys. Over and over again, They build giant, unstoppable government monsters in the hope that they will defend the innocent, only to find the monsters became a far greater threat to the innocent than the threats they were created to protect against. Ironically, what statists actually advocate in their attempts to guarantee justice for all is the legitimization of evil. The truth is that all the belief in authority ever does, and all it ever can do, is introduce more immoral violence into society. This is not an unfortunate coincidence or the side effect of a basically good idea. It is a truism based upon the nature of the belief in authority, and this is easily logically provable.